The last time I tried batch painting 20 miniatures, it took me around 4 weeks to get them finished. Then just a few weeks ago, Paul from Nation painted 86 minis in a week for the Bridge of Khazad Dûm project we were working on with Net1 Videos and the Pickle Jar. He dropped some nuggets of wisdom in his video, so armed with this new arcane knowledge, I decided to give it another shot. I dug out my Conan box from Monolith and got all the undead minions out. That's 20 mummies, 25 skeletons, and a cheery bone monster. It's quite enough for a decent-sized horde, so I thought I'd have a crack at batch painting these, then spend more time later on a leader for them. The detail on these miniatures is very fine, and it's almost a shame to batch paint them, but realistically it's either this or leaving them grey. Now, Paul is a tiny batch painting kaiju, and I don't have the experience or the interest to race him, but I figured that if he can do 86 miniatures in a week, I should be able to do 46, right? Right? Spoiler alert, not even close. But more on that later. I resolved to count only painting time, so basing, priming and planning aren't counted in here. To decorate the bases, I glued down some bits of cork with superglue, then spread some crackle paste over them. This didn't work quite as well as I had hoped, and I think the paste is really meant for larger surfaces, but it did give me a nice wavy texture to work from. I added in some fine sand with more superglue. Now, sand usually looks fine as a base when you add grass and stuff onto it, but it's way too large to represent miniature sand, so I added in another layer using baking powder, which gives a much finer texture. The different layers should also make the finished piece look more interesting. The first hiccup came when I started to put miniatures on painting handles. The handles are important for me as I tend to get hand cramp if I hold the models by the base while painting for too long, limiting the time I can paint in one sitting and adding in a recovery time. So yes, ergonomics are very important for any repetitive work. I didn't have enough to mount all of them at once, so I decided to work on them in sub-batches and just work on the mummies first. Normally I spray a little white on top of the primer because it makes details easier to see, plus it gives me a good idea of where all the shadows go. In this case, I took a step further and sprayed yellow too, since most of these minis will be covered in bandages. It didn't really make a difference, so I probably skip this in future unless I go all in with washes. Before I got to batch painting, I took Paul's advice and painted one miniature end to end. This was very useful as it gave me an idea of what I needed to do for each element. Since I was planning to work fast, I used only basic techniques, so no wet blending or non-metallic metal for these guys, because I can blend okayish or I can blend fast, but not both. Once I knew what I was going for, I got to work on the remaining 19 mummies, and the clock started ticking. I started by base coating the skin in black. If I had to redo this, I'd probably leave this until after I base coated the bandages, because it would save time on cleanup later. As it was, this step took me my first sitting and a bit of the second to complete. Next up, I base coated the bandages in burnt sienna. This took a while and I can't say I enjoyed it, which is fine, it's not for everyone. Around halfway through the batch though, I started to think about it as a drill. Since I don't have to worry about what I was going to do, I tried to focus on how I was doing it and treating it as a learning exercise. It didn't make it any faster, but it did make it a lot more useful. I also base coated the base in the same color at this point. This was the longest step by far, and I was halfway into my third sitting at this point. Luckily the rest was fairly fast. To base coat the blades, I used cadmium mint and primer cyan to make kind of a verdigris color. I'd avoid using mixtures when batch painting normally because they're harder to match, but since this step is fairly fast, it's easy to finish all 20 in one batch. Switching out to a smaller brush, I base coated all the gold areas with burnt umber. Then did a quick cleanup on any areas where I had gotten color in the wrong places. I also used a very dark blue on any areas of the skin which would be catching light, like faces, shoulders and so on. This will not be very visible on camera right now, but it gives us a foundation for the dry brushing that will come in later. To give the patina on the swords more texture, I stippled some blue and brown on the blades. On my fourth sitting, I started with the dry brushing. The blades got a dry brush in black. Verdigris and stuff like that tend to stick around in the recesses, so what we're doing here is darkening the edges where that would get worn off. The base got a nice heavy dry brush of cadmium orange. For the secret sauce, I gave everything a heavy dry brush of Naples yellow. This unifies everything, and the different base coats give different textures a lot of color variety. The idea is that the dry brush acts as a filter on the color under it, so the blue I applied on the faces earlier kind of gives the flesh a greenish cast. The reason I used a very pale yellow instead of white is to make it look a bit warmer, as white would look kind of weird, like the miniature was standing under an LED light or something. After dotting and lining the gold paint, I just needed to put a nice clean black rim around the base. Done. So that's 20 miniatures done in 4 days. It's way short of the 46 I had planned for this week, but I felt I needed a break after this, and at the end of the day I do this for relaxation. This is not really the way I enjoy painting things, and there's no reason to force it. On the other hand, I will be doing this again because the repetitions are very useful in refining basic skills quickly, way more than painting a single miniature is. Are these my best work? Hell no, but I didn't expect them to be. And they're painted well enough for the table. Plus it didn't take 4 weeks, which is great. Peace out.